Hey guys, tonight we are swapping silks and incense for canvas and campfire smoke. We're heading to the raw, sun-beaten, and profoundly misunderstood continent of Australia in the 1840s. We're joining an expedition setting out from the young, rambunctious colony of Sydney to find something magnificent, something that geographers were certain had to be there, a vast, shimmering inland sea at the heart of the country. You'll be hot, you'll be thirsty, and spoiler alert, you're looking for something that isn't there. This is a story about hope, hardship, and one of the most spectacularly unsuccessful quests in the history of exploration. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. I always love to see where everyone is tuning in from, so drop your city and the current time in the comments. It's a great way to feel connected as we start our journey. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The air doesn't smell of salt and sea breeze alone. It's a thick, complicated stew of scents, the sharp tang of hot tar from the shipyards, the sweet, dusty smell of hay, the earthy aroma of livestock, and the bitter bite of coal smoke hanging in the humid air. You're standing on the chaotic docks of Sydney Harbour, a bustling, noisy, and ambitious town clinging to the edge of an immense, silent continent. It's the 1840s. The settlement around you is a jumble of handsome sandstone government buildings, rough hewn wooden storefronts, and muddy, rutted streets steaming with sailors, soldiers in red coats, newly arrived settlers with hopeful faces, and grizzled, weather-beaten men who have already ventured into the bush. You are one of the hopeful ones. You're young, strong, and you've just signed on to the most exciting venture the colony has seen in years. Before you is the source of the chaos, your expedition, being loaded onto a series of wagons and pack-horses. It's a mountain of supplies. There are heavy canvas sacks of flour, barrels of salted pork and beef, crates of tea and sugar, and coils of thick rope. It all seems impossibly solid and real, a bulwark against the vast emptiness you are about to enter. You are a junior member of the team, maybe a surveyor's assistant or a general hand, hired for your steady eye and strong back. Your heart is a tight knot of excitement and a healthy dose of fear. The talk of the town, the very reason for this expensive enterprise, is the inland sea. This is the key piece of mainstream geographical theory of the day. From the coast, explorers had seen that Australia's major rivers, born in the mountains of the Great Dividing Range, flowed west, inland, away from the ocean. Logic dictated that they had to go somewhere. They couldn't just vanish. Therefore, they must drain into a single, massive body of water at the continent's center, a great lake, perhaps a brackish sea like the Caspian. To be the one to discover it would mean fame, fortune, and a place in the history books. You and everyone else on this dock can almost picture it, a vast expanse of blue water under a hot sun, its shores fertile and green. You watch as two men carefully carry a polished mahogany box onto a wagon. Inside, nestled in velvet, is the expedition's chronometer. This is the quirky, high-minded gadget of its day. It's an incredibly precise, spring-driven clock, essential for calculating longitude in a land with no landmarks. It is the single most important piece of scientific equipment you have, and it is shockingly fragile. The idea of this delicate instrument of European precision being jolted across thousands of miles of brutal, uncharted territory is both absurd and essential. It's a perfect metaphor for the entire expedition, a fragile piece of scientific hope being thrown against a vast and indifferent landscape. The men leading the expedition, with their fine coats and leather-bound journals, speak of this journey in grand terms. They talk of unlocking the secrets of the continent, of claiming the interior for the crown, and of scientific discovery. But you've also heard the whispers among the merchants and the squatters. An inland sea means new rivers, new pastures for sheep and cattle, new trade routes. Historians still debate the true balance of these motives. Was it the noble pursuit of knowledge that filled the sails of this expedition, or the more pragmatic, and far more profitable, hunt for grass and gold? For you, standing on the docks, the motive doesn't really matter. It's the adventure. It's the chance to be part of something huge, to see a part of the world no European has ever seen. The expedition leader, a man with a determined glint in his eye and a map that is mostly blank space, gives a final order. The wagon drivers crack their whips, the horses strain, and the heavily laden convoy begins to lurch forward, away from the harbor, away from the familiar noise and the smell of the sea. You take your place alongside one of the wagons, your hand resting on a rough wooden crate. The journey has begun. You take one last look back at the shimmering blue water of the Pacific. You are certain that the next time you see a body of water that large, it will be the one that makes you famous. The first few days are a slow, grinding transition from one world to another. You leave the dense tangle of Sydney behind, moving through the more settled lands of the colony. You pass fenced menacing farms, fields of wheat shimmering in the heat, and small, dusty townships where settlers stop their work to stare as your impressive convoy rumbles past. This is the edge of the known world. Soon, even these last outposts of civilization will disappear behind you. The evenings are when the real purpose of the journey solidifies in your mind. After a long day of walking under a brassy sun, the team makes camp. The horses are unharnessed and fed, fires are lit, and the smell of boiling tea and sizzling salt pork fills the air. It's in these moments, gathered around the flickering or inch glow of a campfire, that the senior men, including the expedition leader himself, lay out the grand theory. The leader unrolls a large map. Most of it is a vast, intimidating blank, labeled simply unexplored. But on the eastern edge, a network of spittery blue lines shows the known river systems. He taps a finger on them. "Gentlemen," he says, his voice full of conviction, "observe the Lachlan, the Murrumbidgee, the Macquarie. Every single river we have discovered on this side of the mountains flows west. They turn their backs on the Pacific. Now, a river is a slave to gravity. It cannot simply stop. It must drain somewhere. This is the central pillar of the belief. It's presented not as a hopeful guess, but as an irrefutable scientific deduction. They model it on other continents. The rivers of Europe flow to the sea. The great rivers of America meet flow to the ocean. Therefore, the rivers of Australia must do the same. They must be tributaries to a single, magnificent watershed. You listen, mesmerized. It makes perfect, beautiful sense. The blank space on the map in front of you isn't empty. It's just waiting to be filled with the shimmering blue of the great inland sea. Of course, there was the matter of Captain Charles Sturt's famous journey down the Murray River, more than a decade ago. He proved that some of these rivers eventually curved south and drained into the Southern Ocean. But that didn't destroy the theory. It just refined it. The rivers further north, the ones that snaked out into the true, unknown interior, their fate was still a mystery. They were the key. They were the ones that would lead you to the prize. And the prize wasn't just a body of water. Here's a wonderfully strange and speculative tidbit that fuels the dreams of the men around the campfire. The interior of Australia, isolated from Olynia, could be a kind of lost world, if a vast, temperate sea has existed there for eons. What sort of life might have evolved on its shores? The discovery of huge fossilized bones of megafaunid giant kangaroos and wombat, minus-like creatures the size of rhinos, has already proven that Australia was once home to monsters. Who's to say some of them don't still survive in the isolated heart of the continent? In your more fanciful moments, you don't just imagine finding a sea, you imagine finding living dinosaurs. This is the great promise that makes the hardship ahead seem like a small price to pay. The heat, the flies, the back-breaking labor, it will all be worth it when you are the first men to gaze upon this hidden ocean and its prehistoric shores. The origins of this powerful myth are something that historians still debate. Was the idea of the inland sea purely a product of European geographical reasoning, a projection of what they expected to find based on their knowledge of other continents? Or was it, as some argue, a profound misunderstanding of Aboriginal knowledge? Early settlers and explorers recorded Aboriginal stories that spoke of vast floods and enormous bodies of water in the interior. Were these ancestral memories of genuinely wetter climates thousands of years ago? Or descriptions of the massive, temporary floodplains of rivers like Cooper Creek and Lake Eyre, which can transform from a desert into a temporary inland ocean after rare, heavy rains? It's possible the European desire for a permanent sea caused them to misinterpret Aboriginal accounts of a landscape that was, in reality, defined by dramatic cycles of boom and bust. But sitting by the fire, you have no such doubts. The theory is sound. The prize is real. You look up at the sky. The stars here, away from the lights of Sydney, are impossibly bright. A cold, glittering canopy of unfamiliar constellations. It feels like the ceiling of a new world. You are on the cusp of the great unknown, armed with impeccable logic and a heart full of hope. The next stage of the journey is to find one of those westward flowing rivers and follow its promise, all the way to the sea. The campfire dreams of a vast blue sea fade with the embers, and the morning brings the cold, hard reality of logistics. The grand theory is one thing. Hauling the physical manifestation of that theory across a continent is another. Your days now fall into a rhythm of labor. You are part of the machine. And that machine runs on flour, salted meat, and sheer willpower. You see the expedition not as a single entity, but as a collection of specialized parts. There are the surveyors with their precious, delicate the adults and sextants, constantly taking readings, triangulating positions, and making notes in their leather-bound books. There are the geologists, chipping at rocks with their hammers and murmuring about strata and sediment. And then there are men like you, the backbone of the operation, whose job is to manage the immense, cumbersome weight of your survival. Let's talk about the food. Your entire world is circumscribed by the contents of the wagons. The foundation of your diet is flour, sacks and sacks of it, each one weighing 100 pounds. Every evening, it's mixed with water and a pinch of salt to be cooked over the campfire into damper, a dense, unleavened bread that is both your staple and your torment. It's heavy in your gut, but it's calories. Then there are the barrels of meat. You can smell them when you get close. A greasy, salty, slightly rancid aroma. Inside is salted pork or salted beef, cured to last for months, if not years. When it's boiled, it's tough, stringy, and incredibly salty. It's a chore to eat, but it's protein. To supplement this, there are crates of dried peas, which are boiled into a monotonous mush. And, most importantly, chests of tea and sugar. Tea is not a luxury here. It is a necessity. The ritual of boiling the billy can and drinking a mug of sweet, black tea is the single greatest comfort of the day. A moment of civilized warmth in a world that is becoming increasingly alien. This is the standard, mainstream diet of any long-range expedition of the era. It was designed for preservation, not pleasure. The health of the men was a constant, nagging worry for the leadership. This brings us to a wonderfully quirky and slightly disgusting piece of expeditionary science: scurvy prevention. The leaders know that a diet of only salt meat and flour will eventually lead to the dreaded disease, with its rotting gums and internal bleeding. They don't know about vitamin C, but they know that something in fruit helps, so they have packed crates of concentrated lime juice, a thick, sour syrup that you are forced to drink, mixed with water and sugar, every single day. But there's another, stranger provision. In one of the most carefully packed crates are hundreds of small, hard, brownish tablets. This is portable soup. It's an invention from the previous century. Essentially a primitive bouillon cube made by boiling down meat and bones for hours and hours until it becomes a thick, gelatinous glue. which is then dried into a hard cake. The idea is that you can dissolve one of these tablets in hot water to create a nutritious broth. It sounds ingenious. In reality, it tastes like boiled leather and despair. But it's a scientific solution to the problem of feeding men on the move. And then there's the transport. The sheer weight of all this food, water, and equipment is hauled by a team of bullocks, their broad shoulders straining against the yokes. And a string of pack-minus horses. The choice of animal is critical, and it's a point that historians still fiercely debate. These early expeditions relied on horses and bullocks because they were the familiar beasts of burden from Europe. They are strong, but they need vast quantities of water and fodder, things that will soon become dangerously scarce. Later, more successful expeditions into the Australian interior would rely on camels. Imported specifically for the purpose, camels were perfectly adapted to the arid environment, capable of carrying huge loads with little water. But in the 1842, that knowledge was still in the future. Your expedition is walking into a desert with animals designed for a meadow. It's a fundamental, strategic flaw that is not yet apparent. A ticking time bomb of thirst built into the very structure of your convoy. You finish loading a wagon, your muscles aching. You look at the line of carts and animals stretching down the track. All of this, the tons of flour, the barrels of meat, the strange scientific foods, the thirsty, inappropriate animals is your lifeline. It's a long, heavy, creaking tether to the world you've left behind. And you know, with a cold certainty, that the success of this grand venture depends not just on the leader's theory, but on how long this tether will last before it finally, inevitably, snaps. At the head of this slumbering beast of an expedition, both literally and figuratively, is its leader. He is a man who embodies the strange mix of scientific curiosity, imperial ambition, and stubborn obsession that defines the age of exploration. You see him every day, riding his horse at the front of the column or poring over his maps by the campfire at night. Each is a former military man, perhaps a captain or a major, which is where he gets his ability to command and his meticulous attention to discipline. He is not a man for small talk. His face is weathered from years of service in hotter parts of the British Empire, and his eyes have a distant, focused look, as if he is already seeing the shores of the sea that exists only in his mind. To you and the other junior hands, he is a remote and formidable figure. You refer to him as the captain or the governor. He rarely speaks to you directly, issuing his orders through his second minus command. But you watch him constantly. His mood sets the tone for the entire camp. If he is calm and confident, the men are relaxed. If he is tense, unirritable, a nervous energy ripples through the entire company. His belief in the inland sea is not just a scientific hypothesis. It is an article of faith. This is the mainstream image of the 19th century explorer, a figure driven by a powerful, almost religious, sense of destiny. He has staked his reputation, his savings, and very possibly his life on this single idea. The government of New South Wales has provided some funding, but a significant portion of the cost has been borne by him and a syndicate of private investors. This isn't just a quest for glory. It's a high-risk business venture. In the evenings, you watch his ritual, while the other men are mending gear or telling stories. He is at his small, collapsible camp desk. He lays out his journals, his inkpot, and his pens. He writes for hours, documenting everything: the day's mileage, the barometric pressure, the geological formations, the behavior of the men. His journal is the official, scientific record of the expedition, but it is also, you suspect, a deeply personal document, a place where he wrestles with his doubts and reinforces his convictions. And here's a quirky, but telling, detail about his equipment. Tucked into a special leather pouch, he carries a small, beautifully illustrated book. It's not the Bible. It's a volume of poetry, perhaps lured by Wren or Percy Shelley. Several times, you have seen him reading it by the last light of day. This seems like a strange affectation for a hard-bitten military man, but it's a key to understanding him. He is not just a soldier or a scientist. He is a man of the Romantic era. He believes that nature is not just a resource to be exploited, but a force to be experienced, a source of sublime and terrible beauty. He is searching for the inland sea not just for its strategic value, but for its poetry. He wants to be the one to stand on its shore and feel the awe that Byron felt looking at the ocean. The psychology of these expedition leaders is a subject of endless fascination and debate for historians. What drove them to abandon comfortable lives and risk everything on these brutal, often fatal, journeys? Was it pure ambition? A desire to escape the rigid social structures of Britain? Or was there, as some have argued, a kind of geographical neurosis, a deep-seated psychological need to fill in the blank spaces on the map, to impose order on a world that seemed chaotic and unknown? It's likely a complex cocktail of all these things. The leader's relationship with the land itself is complex. He is here to conquer it, to map it, to tame it with names and lines on a page. Yet, he is also utterly at its mercy. A broken wagon wheel, a sudden fever, a dried up waterhole, any of these could bring his grand ambitions to a grinding halt. His authority over his men is absolute, but his authority over the continent is an illusion. One evening, the problem arises. One of the bullocks has gone lame. Its hoof split on a sharp rock. The teamsters argue about the best course of action. The leader walks over, examines the animal with a cold, but freezing eye, and then gives a single, quiet order: leave it. The men fall silent. Leaving a valuable animal seems wasteful, even cruel, but the leader knows that to slow the entire expedition for one lame bullock is a greater risk. The mission comes first, always. You watch him turn and walk back to his tent without a second glance. It's a moment of ruthless, pragmatic leadership, and it tells you everything you need to know about him. He is a man who will sacrifice anything: animals, equipment, perhaps even men to reach his goal. His determination is both the expedition's greatest strength and its most terrifying liability. You are following a man who will not, and cannot, turn back. The last farm, with its hopeful patch of green and the lonely curl of smoke from its chimney, finally vanishes behind a line of low, gray-green hills. A palpable change occurs in the atmosphere of the expedition. The tether to the known world has been cut. There are no more roads to follow, no more settlers to wave at. There is only the bush. You are now really entering the landscape you came to conquer, and the landscape begins to push back in subtle, persistent ways. The gentle, rolling hills of the coastal region give way to a flatter, harsher terrain. The trees change. The lush, broad-leafed eucalypts are replaced by tougher, scrub-beer species acacias with vicious thorns, gnarled paper barks, and strange, skeletal-looking casuarina. The world turns from green to a palette of ochre, brown, and a dusty, washed-out olive. The grass is no longer a soft carpet but a collection of sharp, spiky tussocks that snatch at your trousers and make walking a chore. The ground underfoot is harder, baked by the sun, and littered with loose, ankle-turning stones. You and the other men fall into a new, more serious rhythm. The easy chatter of the first week dies down, replaced by a more focused silence. Each man is concentrating on the task at hand, managing his horse, keeping the wagon wheels out of ruts, or simply putting one foot in front of the other. This is the moment of commitment. Up until now, turning back would have been disappointing but easy. Now, every step forward is a step further into a vast, indifferent wilderness. The coast, with its ships and its society, is no longer just a place. It's a memory, a concept that grows more distant with every mile. The leader seems to thrive in this new environment. His posture is straighter, his orders more crisp. He is finally in his element, away from the bureaucrats and politicians of Sydney. He rides ahead with a couple of scouts, searching for the best path. his figure a small, determined speck against the immense, empty horizon. The mainstream narrative of Australian exploration is often framed as a battle against a hostile land. But as you walk, you start to feel it's not hostility you're facing, it's indifference. The land doesn't care that you're here. Your grand purpose, your scientific instruments, your imperial flag, they mean nothing to the ancient, silent rhythm of this place. The sun rises, the heat builds, the flies descend, the sun sets. Your presence is a minor, temporary irritation, like a swarm of ants crawling across a sleeping giant. And the silence is the most profound change. In the colony, there was always a background noise, the clang of a blacksmith's hammer, the shouting of sailors, the barking of dogs. Here, the only sounds are the ones you make: the creak of the wagon axles, the jingle of harnesses, the low murmur of the men's voices, the thud of the bullocks' hooves when the convoy stops for a rest. The silence that rushes in is absolute and unnerving. It's a physical presence, a weight on your eardrums. Here's a quirky detail that speaks to this sensory shift. Many early explorers, in their journals, wrote obsessively about the sounds of birds. The birds were the only other voices in this silent world. They would describe the screech of a cockatoo, the manic, laughing call of a kookaburra, or the strange, piping notes of the magpie. It was as if their ears, starved of familiar human sounds, were desperately trying to find meaning and companionship in the avian chorus. For you, the call of an unseen bird is both a comforting sign of life and a reminder of how alien this world is. The psychological impact of this transition from a settled to a wild landscape is a recurring theme that historians of exploration study. How did it affect the minds of men who came from the crowded, structured landscapes of Europe? Some were invigorated by the freedom and the scale of it all. Others were broken by the agoraphobia, the terrifying sense of being a tiny, insignificant speck in an infinite void. There was no frame to the picture, no comforting horizon defined by a church steeple or a line of hills. There was just more. As the sun begins to set on your first day in the true wilderness, you look back the way you came, the east. There is nothing to see, no sign of the world you left behind. You look west, to where the sun is sinking in a spectacular, fiery blaze of orange and purple. There is nothing to see there either, just an endless expanse of scrubland stretching into the deepening twilight. You are then tethered. You are a ship that has left the sight of land, sailing on a sea of brown earth instead of blue water. Your faith is no longer in the solid ground of the colony, but in the compass, the chronometer, and the burning, obsessive conviction of the man leading you into the blank center of the map. After weeks of slow, arduous travel across the dry, scrubby plains, you finally find what you've been looking for: a river. It's not a mighty, rushing torrent, but a slow, wide, muddy channel lined with majestic river-red gums, their white trunks ghostly in the harsh sunlight. A cheer goes up from the men. This is it. This is the artery that will lead you to the heart of the continent. The leader, after consulting his maps and taking readings, confirms it. This is one of the rivers that flows west. Its current, sluggish as it is moving in the right direction. It is a liquid pathway into the unknown. The plan is simple and logical. You will follow it. A new routine begins. The expedition no longer strikes out across the open country. Instead, you hug the banks of the river, your wagons crunching over the dry floodplain. The presence of the water changes everything. The mood of the camp lifts instantly. The horses and bullocks can drink their fill. The men can wash the dust from their faces. The oppressive thirst that was a constant, low-level anxiety is temporarily banished. For the first few weeks, the river feels like a promise kept. It remains broad and deep. The country along its banks is richer than the plains you just crossed. The bird life is more abundant. You see flocks of white cockatoos that rise from the treetops like a sudden snowstorm, their screeches echoing across the water. You spot kangaroos grazing in the clearings and strange, Lizard-light go in sunning themselves on fallen logs. The journey becomes almost pleasant. A slow, meandering cruise into the interior. The days are still hot and the work is still hard, but there is a sense of purpose and direction. Every bend in the river brings a fresh wave of anticipation. Around this next curve, you think, we will see it. The landscape will open up, the river will widen, and the great sea will be before us. This was the experience of many early Australian explorers. They would follow these inland rivers, the Macquarie, the Lachlan, the Darling, for hundreds of miles, fueled by this exact hope. This is a mainstream part of the story of Australian exploration. This long, hopeful prelude, the river seemed like classic, well-behaved waterways, promising a connection to a larger system. You spend your evenings fishing. The river is full of strange, bony fish that you cook over the coals. They taste of mud, but they are a welcome change from the endless salt pork. The men's spirits are high. They tell stories around the campfire, their confidence bolstered by the constant, reassuring presence of the flowing water. Here's a quirky detail that becomes part of your daily life: the river gums. These magnificent trees are a world unto themselves. They drop their bark in long, curling strips, littering the ground with tinder. They also have a habit of dropping their massive branches without warning, earning them the nickname widow-makers. You learn quickly not to camp directly underneath their largest limbs, a piece of practical bush knowledge passed down from the more experienced hands. The trees are both your shade and a potential threat, a perfect metaphor for this beautiful but treacherous new world. But as you travel further west, a subtle change begins. The river, while still flowing, seems to be losing its conviction. It spreads out in places, becoming a series of shallow, interconnected channels rather than a single, deep one. The lushness of the riverbank starts to fade. The mighty river reed gums are spaced further apart, and the land between them is salt minus, crusted and barren. The leader spends more and more time studying his charts. The water itself is changing, too. An attendant brings the captain a cup of river water. He tastes it, and his face darkens. He spits it out. Brackish, he says. The water is becoming salty. This is a deeply unsettling development. It doesn't fit the theory. A freshwater river should lead to a freshwater lake or a saltwater sea. A river that is slowly turning into a salty swamp is a hydrological anomaly, a puzzle that no one can solve. Historians are still fascinated by the unique and deceptive nature of these Australian river systems. They are, by global standards, incredibly ancient and have extremely low gradients. Unlike the fast-flowing, deeply-cutting rivers of yore, a poor North America, they often meander aimlessly across vast, flat plains, petering out in complex networks of swamps, floodplains, and salt pans. They are designed by the continent's unique geology to absorb and dissipate water, not to deliver it efficiently to a single destination. The explorers, with their European mindset, were trying to read a book written in a language they couldn't comprehend. The promise of the river is starting to feel less like a guarantee and more like a cruel joke. The men's confident chatter around the campfire begins to quiet down. The easy optimism of the past few weeks is evaporating like the water itself under the relentless sun. You still follow the river, but now you do so with a growing sense of dread. You are following a promise that is slowly, quietly, breaking before your very eyes. The slow, hopeful cruise is over. The reality of the expedition has become a monotonous, grinding routine. The landscape no longer changes in any meaningful way, and the days blur into a seamless cycle of repetitive labor, marked only by the rising and setting of a merciless sun. Your day begins before dawn. In the cool, gray darkness, the first sound is the call of the man on watch. Hello, all's well. Then, the camp slowly stirs to life. You crawl out of your swag, the canvas stiff with morning dew, and the first order of business is always the same: the fire. The kindling from the dry river gum bark catches quickly, and soon the billy can is on, its blackened surface reflecting the first orange glow of the coming day. The breakfast is always the same: a mug of strong, sweet tea that scalds your throat, and a thick, heavy slice of leftover damper from the night before, perhaps toasted on a stick over the coals until it's warm and smoky. There's no conversation, just the quiet, focused ritual of getting calories into your body for the day ahead. Then the packing begins. Every single item must be stowed back on the wagons and packed minus horses in its precise place. The sleeping gear is rolled and tied. The cooking pots are scraped clean with sand and packed away. The scientific instruments are carefully checked and secured in their padded boxes. It's a slow, methodical process that takes nearly 2 hours. You learn to do your part with a kind of mindless efficiency. By the time the sun has cleared the horizon, the expedition is on the move. And then comes the core of your existence: walking. You walk for hours. The sun climbs higher. The heat intensifies, and the dust kicked up by the bullocks and wagons coats your throat and clothes. You fall into a trance-like state, a walking meditation of misery. You focus on the back of the wagon in front of you, the rhythm of your own footsteps, the constant, nagging thirst. Around midday, the leader calls a halt. The stop is short, just long enough to water the animals and for the men to find a sliver of shade under a scrawny acacia. You might chew on a piece of hard, salty jerky, washing it down with a swig of warm, metallic minus tasting water from your canteen. There's no real rest. The sun is too high, the heat too oppressive. Then, you walk again. The afternoon is the worst part of the day. The heat is at its peak, shimmering off the baked earth in visible waves. The world seems to bleach out, all colored rained by the intensity of the light. Your mind goes numb. You cease to think. You simply endure. As the sun begins to dip towards the horizon, the leader will find a suitable spot to camp, always near whatever water source you are currently following, and the entire morning process happens in reverse. Unpacking. The horses and bullocks are unharnessed, their backs run sore, and lead to water. The tents are pitched, the fires are lit. The same meal is cooked boiled salt meat, maybe some pea mush, and fresh damper. This relentless monotony is a key feature you'd find in the journals of almost any explorer of this era. The grand adventure is, in fact, 99% mind-minus numbing, repetitive toil. The moments of high drama or discovery are rare islands in a vast ocean of boredom. And here's a quirky, but soul-minus crushing, detail of the routine Sunday. The leader is a devout man, and on Sundays, the expedition rests. You might think this is a welcome break. It is not. It is, in many ways, the worst day of the week. You are not allowed to work, to mend gear, to hunt, or even to wash your clothes. You are expected to sit quietly, read the Bible if you have one, and contemplate. The enforced idleness is a form of torture. With nothing to do, your mind is free to dwell on the discomfort, the homesickness, the sheer, crushing futility of your situation. You find yourself praying for Monday, just so you have something to do to distract you from your own thoughts. Historians who study the daily life of these expeditions often point to this monotony as one of the greatest psychological challenges. It wasn't just the physical hardship that broke men. It was the slow, grinding erosion of the soul, the ability to endure boredom, to find some inner resource to fall back on during the long, empty hours, was as important as physical strength. The sun sets, the stars come out, cold and brilliant. You sit by the fire, too tired to talk. You chew your leathery meat into heavy bread. You know that tomorrow will be exactly the same as today, and the day after that, and the day after that. The grand quest for the inland sea has shrunk to this a simple, desperate cycle of waking, walking, and sleeping, repeated over and over again in all, and that does not care. There are two constants in your new, monotonous life. To companions that are with you from the moment you wake until the moment you collapse into a fitful sleep. They are your tormentors, Your ever mine, this present familiars the sun and the flies. The sun is not the gentle, life minus giving or beer new back in England or even in coastal Sydney. Here, in the interior, it is a malevolent entity. It is a physical weight, a presence that presses down on you from a sky of pale, washed minus out blue. There is no escape from it. The sparse, thin minus leaf trees of the Australian bush offer paltry, shifting patches of shade that seem to mock your desire for relief. You learn to hate the sky. You learn to live your life with your hat pulled low, your eyes squinted, your gaze fixed on the ground in front of you to avoid the blinding glare. The heat is not just a temperature. It's an enemy. It drains your strength, saps your will, and bakes the moisture from your body. Your skin is permanently sunburned, your lips cracked and peeling. The simple act of touching a metal tool that has been left in the sun can result in a painful burn. This is a mainstream, recurring theme in every account of inland exploration. The shock and awe at the sheer, brutal power of the Australian sun. Men who had served in India or Africa wrote in their journals that they had never experienced anything like it. It was a dry, relentless, all-minus pervading heat that felt like it was cooking you from the inside out. And then, there are the flies. They are not just a nuisance. They are a plague. A living, crawling, buzzing curtain that descends on you at dawn and does not leave until dusk. They are a specific type of bush fly. Small, black, and incredibly persistent. They are not interested in your food. They are interested in you. They crave the moisture and the salts from your body. They swarm your face, trying to crawl into your eyes, your nostrils, your mouth, your ears. You wave your hands in front of your face in a constant, futile gesture that the men call the Australian salute. It does nothing. The moment your hand moves, the flies are back. They land on your eyelids. They crawl across your lips while you try to speak. You accidentally eat them. You breathe them in. Their buzzing is a constant, maddening soundtrack to your existence. This brings us to a wonderfully miserable, quirky invention born of this torment, the fly veil. Some of the men, including the captain, have a piece of fine netting attached to the brim of their hats. They drape this over their faces, creating a small, personal cage to keep the worst of the swarm at bay. It works, to an extent, but it makes it harder to see. It traps the heat, and it's incredibly stuffy. You have to lift the veil every time you want to drink from your canteen or wipe the sweat from your brow, which immediately lets a dozen of the persistent little demons inside with you. It's a choice between two different kinds of misery. You see the effect this has on the men. Tempers are short. A minor disagreement can flare into a shouting match, fueled by heat minus adult exhaustion and the maddening, tickling presence of a dozen flies on your face. You see men sitting by themselves, just staring into space, their faces twitching, their hands moving in that constant, defeated salute. The flies are not just a physical torment, they are a psychological one. They are a living symbol of this land's ability to wear you down, to find your every weakness and exploit it with a million tiny, irritating attacks. Historians often focus on the grand challenges of exploration, the lack of water, the hostile encounters, the vast distances, but sometimes it's the small, persistent miseries that truly break a person's spirit. It's a subject of debate how much these minor factors, like insect plagues, contributed to the failure of expeditions. Could a man on the verge of a great discovery be turned back simply because he could no longer stand the flies? It's entirely possible. There is a limit to human endurance, and that limit can be found just as easily in a cloud of insects as in a waterless desert. At night, you get a brief reprieve. As the sun sets and the air cools, the flies vanish as if by magic. The sweet, profound peace of a fly-free face is the greatest luxury you know. But you know it's temporary. You know that as soon as the first light of dawn touches the sky, they will be back, waiting for you, a buzzing, hungry legion ready to reclaim your face. The sun and the flies, they are the true rulers of this land, and you are just a temporary, soft-minus guide trespass in their kingdom. The river, your muddy, brackish guide, has been growing more and more hesitant for weeks. The strong, confident channel that you first encountered has dissipated into a confusing labyrinth of shallow streams, swamps, and stagnant pools. The expedition's pace slows to a crawl as the scouts struggle to find a path for the heavy wagons through the boggy, treacherous ground. The mood of the camp, once so optimistic, is now thick with a quiet, sullen dread. And then, one afternoon, you come around a bend and see it. Or rather, you don't see it. The river is gone. It hasn't just narrowed. It has vanished completely. In front of you, where there should be a channel of water, there is a wide, cracked, sun-baked expanse of gray mud, littered with the corpses of dried minus, outreeds, and the white, skeletal remains of fish. The riverbed stretches out before you, a pale, ugly scar on the face of the land, and then disappears into the shimmering heat haze of the horizon. A collective groan rises from the men. The scouts ride up and down the banks for a mile in each direction. The report is the same. The river has terminated. It has not flowed into a great sea. It has simply given up, defeated by the immense, thirsty flatness of the continent. It has been swallowed by the sand. This is the first great, catastrophic failure of the expedition. Your liquid road has come to a dead end. The captain stands on the edge of the dead river, staring out at the cracked mud, his face a mask of disbelief. You can see the gears turning in his mind, trying to reconcile this harsh reality with his beautiful, logical theory. His entire plan was predicated on following this watercourse. Now, he has no plan. This experience was the great, heartbreaking discovery of early inland explorers like John Oxley and Thomas Mitchell. They followed these magnificent rivers for hundreds of miles, deep into the interior, only to find them fanning out and disappearing into vast, impassable reed beds, or simply vanishing into the earth. It was a phenomenon that defied all their European experience of hydrology. They called the vast swamps marshes, but they weren't like any marsh in England. They were the graveyards of rivers. The expedition makes a grim camp on the banks of this ghost-minus river. The men are silent, their faces sullen. The last vestiges of hope have been drained away. You are in the middle of nowhere, hundreds of miles from the coast, and your only guide has just abandoned you. Here's a quirky and sad detail about these moments of failure. The explorers, being men of their time, would often try to salvage some sense of purpose by giving the place a name. They would bestow a grand, melancholy name on the site of their defeat. Names like Mount Disappointment, Lake Despair, or Deception River started to litter the maps of Australia. It was a way of marking their sorrow, of turning a geographical feature into a monument of their own thwarted ambitions. Your leader will do the same. Naming the dry channel before your resolution came aimed dripping with a bitter, ironic bravado. For the next few days, the expedition is paralyzed. The leader sends out scouting parties in every direction, desperate to find another watercourse, another sign that his theory is not entirely wrong. You are part of one of these parties. You ride for 2 days across a flat, featureless plain under a blistering sun. The only vegetation is a low, gray-green saltbush and the occasional, skeletal dead tree. There is no water. There is nothing. Just a silent, empty, and profoundly intimidating landscape. The failure of the rivers is a major point of discussion for environmental historians. It marks the moment when the European model of landscape was shattered by the unique reality of the Australian continent. This wasn't a land of predictable, orderly systems. It was a land of extremes, of boom and bust, of long droughts punctuated by biblical floods. The explorers were learning, the hard way, that they were not in a new version of Europe. They were somewhere else entirely, a place that operated by a different set of rules that they were only just beginning to dimly comprehend. You return to the main camp, exhausted and demoralized. The other scouting parties report the same thing. There is no other river. There is only a vast, waterless expanse. The expedition is at a crossroads. To go forward means to abandon the safety of a known, albeit dead water source and strike out into the true desert. To go back means to admit defeat. You look at the captain's face in the firelight. It is set like a granite stone. You know, with a sinking feeling in the pit of your stomach, what he is going to decide. The river may have given up, but he has not. The decision is made. You will press on. The expedition will leave the ghost of the river behind and march directly west, into the great unknown, guided only by the compass and the captain's iron will. The camp is abuzz with a nervous, frantic energy as the men prepare for the most dangerous phase of the journey. Every available vessel barrels, canteens, water skins is filled from the last stagnant, brackish pool in the dead riverbed. This water is all you will have until you find the next source, wherever that may be. The first day's march away from the river is a psychological ordeal. With every step, you are moving further from the only source of life you've known for months. The familiar line of river gums shrinks and then vanishes behind you. Now, the landscape is truly empty. A flat, weed-minus earth plain stretches in every direction. Its monotony broken only by the shimmering heat hastened the occasional low, scrubby bush. That night, you make a dry camp. There is no river to wash in, no fish to catch. The fire is smaller, made from the dead. Dry what you've carried with you on the wagons. The mood is somber. The usual low murmur of conversation is absent. Men sit alone, staring into the flames, lost in their own thoughts. As darkness falls, you lie on your back and look up at the sky, and you are stunned, away from the slight humidity and tree-minus cover of the river. In the clear, dry air of the desert, the night sky is a revelation. It is not black. It is a riot of light. The Milky Way is not a faint, cloudy band. It is a thick, blazing river of stars, so bright it feels like you could reach up and touch it. You can see nebulae in stark lusters with the naked eye, faint smudges of cosmic dust against a velvet background. The sheer number and brilliance of the stars is overwhelming, beautiful, and deeply unsettling. This is a common experience reported by anyone who has spent time in the deep outback. The night sky is one of the region's greatest and most terrifying spectacles. It is a mainstream tourist attraction today, but for you, in the 1842nd, it is something else. It is a reminder of your own insignificance on a cosmic scale. You are a tiny, fragile speck of life, huddled around a pathetic little fire, adrift in an incomprehensible universe. The beauty of the sky doesn't bring you comfort. It brings you a sense of profound, existential loneliness. You try to find familiar constellations, but the sky is alien. The Southern Cross hangs high overhead, a stark, lonely signpost in this strange celestial sphere. You can see the Magellanic Clouds, two satellite galaxies of our own, looking like detached, ghostly pieces of the Milky Way. And here's a quirky, specific detail of your nightly observation. You notice that some of the stars are not stars at all. They are holes in the sky. Within the brightest parts of the Milky Way, there are patches of pure, starless black. One of them, right near the Southern Cross, is particularly prominent. It looks like a dark, vaguely bird-minus shaped silhouette against the blaze of light. This is the Coal-Sack Nebula, a dense cloud of interstellar dust that blocks the light from the stars behind it. To you, it looks like a malevolent, watching eye in the sky. Aboriginal astronomers, who have been studying the sky for tens of thousands of years, have their own powerful stories and names for these dark constellations. To them, the darkness is as meaningful as the light. To you, it's just another piece of this world's terrifying alienness. The scientific men of the expedition, the captain and the surveyors, have a different relationship with the sky. For them, it is a tool. You see them at night with their sextants and telescopes, carefully measuring the angles of the stars to calculate their latitude and check their chronometer. The sky is their map, their only reliable guide in this featureless land. But even they, you notice, sometimes just stop and stare, humbled by the spectacle. The debate among historians about the psychological impact of the Australian landscape on European explorers often touches on this duality. The landscape was simultaneously a scientific problem to be solved and an aesthetic or spiritual experience that overwhelmed the senses. The men were caught between a need to measure and control the land and the humbling realization that they were utterly powerless within it. The campfire crackles. A tiny spark of ore inch against the immense, glittering blackness. You pull your blanket tighter around you. The earth beneath you is hardened cold. The sky above you is vast and magnificent. Then you have never, in your entire life, felt so completely and utterly alone. As you push deeper into the arid heartland, leaving the river system far behind, the nature of life itself seems to change. The familiar birds and fish of the wetlands have vanished. The world is quieter, emptier, but it is not dead. It is populated by a new cast of creatures, beings that are uniquely, stubbornly adapted to this harsh environment. Your journey becomes a slow, rolling encounter with the bizarre and wonderful wildlife of the Australian interior. The most dramatic encounters are with the kangaroos. You've seen them before, near the coast, but here they are different. They are larger, leaner, and their fur is the color of the red earth they live on. They are masters of this landscape. You will be struggling through the midday heat, and a huge blue-marade dominant male red kangaroo will come bounding past, seemingly without effort. They move with an incredible, flowing grace, their massive tails acting as a counterbalance in the third leg. They can cover 30 feet in a single bound. They watch your slow, clumsy convoy with what looks like a mixture of curiosity and disdain, and then they are gone, disappearing over the horizon in a matter of seconds. They are a humbling sight. Your expedition, with all its scientific knowledge and modern equipment, can barely survive here. These animals thrive. They are a living testament to the land's own ancient wisdom. Then there are the emus. You see them in small groups, striding across the plains with a strange, jerky, yet dignified gait. They are enormous birds, taller than a man, with shaggy hair minus like feathers and a piercing, prehistoric gaze. They will stop and stare at you from 100 yards away, their heads swiveling on their long necks. There is an intelligence in their eyes, an unnerving sense of being observed and assessed by a mind that is utterly alien. They are like feathered dinosaurs, ghosts from a different epoch. This is a mainstream part of the Australian explorer's experience, the constant sense of wonder and bafflement at the unique fauna. The explorers work cataloging these animals for science. Of course, the expedition has a naturalist whose job it is to shoot, scan, and preserve specimens to be sent back to the museums in London. But your own reaction is less scientific and more visceral. These creatures are not just zoological curiosities. They are proof that you have entered a different reality, a place that was fire-minus walled off from the rest of the world for millions of years, allowing life to evolve on a completely different path. And the weirdness doesn't stop with the big animals. Here's a quirky and often frustrating detail: the lizards. The land is teeming with them. There are huge, muscular goannas, sometimes 6 feet long, that rustle through the undergrowth like miniature dragons. Then there are smaller, stranger reptiles. You might see a thorny devil, a small lizard covered in an armor of intimidating spikes, moving with a slow, rocking motion, or a frill-minus-necked lizard, which, when threatened, will suddenly erect a huge, circular frill around its head and hiss aggressively, looking like a terrifying, umbrella-wielding monster. You learn to check your boots in the morning before putting them on, just in case a curious reptile has decided to make a home there for the night. The relationship between the explorers and the wildlife is complex, a subject that environmental historians continue to explore. On one hand, the animals were a source of wonder and a vital supplement to the monotonous diet of salt pork. Kangaroo tail soup becomes a rare and sought-after delicacy. On the other hand, the animals were also a source of frustration. Kangaroos and emus were notoriously difficult to hunt, often leading the men on long, exhausting chases for very little reward. You also become acutely aware of what you don't see. You see no predators, no large carnivores like the tigers of India or the lions of Africa. The largest predator you ever encounter is the dingo, a wild dog that you sometimes see trotting along the horizon, or whose mournful howls you hear in the dead of night. This lack of big predators gives the landscape a strange, eerie peacefulness, but also a feeling of imbalance, as if a key character is missing from the drama. Your journey is no longer just a march across a static landscape. It's a series of encounters with the land's inhabitants. Each strange animal is a new paragraph in the story this continent is telling you, and the story is one of resilience, adaptation, and a deep, ancient weirdness that you are only just beginning to appreciate. You came here to impose your own order on this land, but you are slowly, steadily, being forced to adapt to its own. The monotony of the march, the oppressive heat, and the alien landscape are not the only enemies you face. There is a more insidious, invisible threat that haunts the expedition, a fear that is whispered about around the campfires and recorded with clinical anxiety in the captain's journal. It is the fear of scurvy. You are now months into the journey. The fresh provisions you started with are long gone. Your diet has been reduced to its grim. Preserved core flour, salt meat, and tea. Every man on the team, from the leader down to you, knows that this diet is a ticking clock. Sooner or later, if you don't find a source of fresh food, your bodies will begin to fail. The memory of past expeditions hangs heavy in the air. Everyone knows the stories of naval voyages where entire crews were decimated by the plague of the sea. They know the gruesome symptoms, the profound lethargy, the aching joints, the bleeding gums, the old wounds that mysteriously reopen, the thought of your body slowly disintegrating from the inside out, hundreds of miles from any hope of help, is a primal, terrifying fear. The expedition's main weapon against this threat is the lime juice. This is the mainstream, accepted medical wisdom of the day. The British Navy had made daily rations of lime or lemon juice mandatory at the end of the 18th century, effectively conquering the disease at sea. Your leader, a military man, enforces this with iron discipline. Every day, an attendant dispenses the rational measure of the thick, sour, dark brown syrup, which you mix with water and sugar to create a drink called shrubs. It tastes medicinal and unpleasant, but you drink it religiously. It is your shield, your magic potion. The problem, which you don't yet know, is that the magic is weak. The process of preserving the lime juice in the 19th century, boiling it, and storing it in a copper-minus topped casks often destroyed most of the berry vitamin C it was meant to provide. Your daily ration is, in fact, almost useless. This brings us to a truly quirky and desperate aspect of the anti-minus scurvy fight. The men are encouraged to eat anything and everything that is green. When you stumble upon a patch of wild spinach or a plant with edible minus-looking leaves, the naturalist will examine it. If it's deemed non-minus poisonous, it's gathered and boiled. You find yourselves eating strange, bitter minus-tasting weeds and wild greens, hoping that somewhere in their stringy fibers is the mysterious element that will keep you alive. One of the most prized discoveries is a plant the men call purslane or pigweed, a low-minus growing succulent that you sometimes find in the shade of a rock. It has fleshy leaves and a slightly sour taste. You chop it up and mix it into your damper, or boil it with your salt meat. It adds a hint of freshness to the relentlessly monotonous diet, and more importantly, it feels like you are doing something, fighting back against the inevitable decay. The history of scurvy and its cure is a fascinating, untragic story. The knowledge that citrus fruit could prevent the disease existed for centuries, but it was often lost, ignored, or misunderstood. James Linn's famous experiment on the HMS Salisbury in 1747 is often cited as the definitive proof. but it took the deeply conservative naval and medical establishments another 50 years to officially act on it. Historians still debate why this life-saving knowledge was so slow to be adopted. Was it institutional inertia, or the fact that different preservation methods for the juice led to inconsistent results, making the cure seem unreliable? For you, the fear of scurvy becomes a constant, low-level hum of anxiety. Every time you feel unusually tired, every time your gums feel a little tender when you chew your tough damper, a cold spike of fear goes through you. Is it starting? You begin to watch the other men with a kind of morbid curiosity. You look at the color of their skin, the way they walk. You see a man rubbing his aching knee and you wonder, is it just from the long march? Or is it the first sign? The health of the expedition becomes a collective obsession. The captain's journal is filled with entries about the men's humors and constitutions. He is fighting a 2- front war, one against the vast, empty landscape outside, and another against the microscopic, internal landscape of his men's bodies, and he knows, with a grim certainty, that he is slowly losing the second war. Your supplies are finite. The land is not providing. The clock is ticking. The landscape has become an endless, hypnotic repetition of red, earth, and blue sky. The featureless plains offer nothing for the eye to hold on to. No sense of progress or distance. Your world has been reduced to the small, mobile bubble of the expedition, a tiny island of humanity in an ocean of nothingness. And in this empty world, your mind, starved of stimulus, begins to play tricks on you. One blazing hot afternoon, as you are trudging along in your usual heat-dazed stupor, a shout comes from the front of the column. Water! By God, water! You lift your head, your heart leaping in your chest. You follow the pointing fingers of the men, and you see it, on the horizon, perhaps 5 or 6 miles away, is a vast, shimmering expanse of brilliant blue. It's a lake, a huge lake, its surface ruffled by a gentle breeze, its edges fringed with the dark green of trees. It's the sea. It has to be. A wave of delirious joy washes over the expedition. Men are shouting, clapping each other on the back, their faces streaked with tears of relief. The suffering, the thirst, the endless marching, it was all worth it. The captain, his face transformed with a look of triumphant vindication, immediately orders the party to change course and head directly for the lake. The mood is electric. The pace of the march quickens, fueled by a sudden surge of adrenaline. The weary horses seem to sense the change, taking up their heads and moving with a new energy. You forget your thirst, your aching feet, your sunburn. All you can think about is plunging your face into that cool, clear water. You march for an hour. The lake on the horizon seems no closer, but it's still there, shimmering and inviting. You press on. Another hour passes. The sun beats down. The initial elation begins to be replaced by a nagging confusion. The lake is a phantom. No matter how far you walk towards it, it remains maddeningly on the horizon, retreating before you. Finally, the captain, his face now a mask of grim frustration, calls a halt. He raises his telescope to his eye and stares at the horizon for a long time. He lowers it slowly. It's a mirage, he says, his voice flattened, dead. There's nothing there. The silence that follows is more profound than any you have yet experienced. The beautiful lake, the trees, the promise of relief, it was all a trick of the light. A cruel joke played by the superheated air on your desperate, hopeful eyes. The crushing weight of disappointment that settles over the men is a physical thing, more oppressive than the heat itself. This is the famous phenomenon of the Fata Morgana, a complex superior mirage that is common in deserts and polar regions. It's not a simple heat shimmer. It can produce incredibly detailed and realistic images of objects or features that are located far over the horizon, or even create images of things that aren't there at all. For the explorers of the Australian interior, it was a constant source of both hope and despair. This is a mainstream, well-documented part of their psychological torment. You look back at the horizon. The lake is still there, shimmering and beautiful. Knowing it's an illusion doesn't make it disappear. It just makes it more monstrous. It's a perfect image of your quest. You are chasing a beautiful, logical idea that may, in fact, be a complete phantom. Here's a quirky and debated aspect of these mirages. Could they have been responsible for some of the expedition ghost stories or reports of phantom mountains and rivers that appeared on early maps, only to be removed by later, more skeptical surveyors? It's entirely possible. An entire mountain range could appear on the horizon due to atmospheric conditions, be dutifully recorded by a desperate explorer, and then never be seen again. Historians of cartography have to untangle which features on old maps were real and which were products of light, dare, and wishful thinking. The march resumes, but the energy is gone. The men trudge on in a sullen, bitter silence. The trust in their own senses has been shaken. The land is not just empty. It is deceptive. It lies to you. It shows you your heart's desire and then snatches it away. That evening, no one speaks at the Phantom Lake. It's an unspoken, shared humiliation. You try to wash the dust from your throat with your meager, warm water ration, but you can still feel the ghost of that cool, clear, non-existent water. You have been tricked, not by an enemy, but by physics itself, and it's a lesson you won't forget. In this land, you cannot even trust what you see with your own eyes. Days after the psychological blow of the Mirage, as you are pushing through a particularly desolate stretch of mulga scrub, something happens that jolts you out of your monotonous rhythm. The scouts riding ahead suddenly halt and signal back to the main party. The captain gallops forward. There is a tense, quiet conference. The order is passed down the line: stop. Be silent. You look ahead, straining to see what has caused the alarm. And then you see them. A small group of people, perhaps a dozen, emerging from the thin scrubland to your left. They are a family group: men, women, and children. Their skin is dark, the color of desert mahogany, and they are almost completely naked, carrying only long, thin spears and strange, curved pieces of wood. They are the first human beings you have seen since you left the last colonial outpost months ago. They are the aboriginal inhabitants of this land, the people your expedition has been abstractly aware of, but has not yet encountered. The two groups: yours, with your noisy wagons, your sweating, clumsy animals, and your thick woolen clothes, and theirs, moving with a silent, fluid grace-through a landscape that is their home. Stop and stare at each other across 100 yards of reed dust. It is a moment of profound, silent, and deeply awkward confrontation. The captain has a strict policy for this eventuality. There is to be no aggression. He has read the reports of other explorers, some of whom were attacked, others who were helped. He knows that the success or failure of his mission could depend on how these encounters are handled. He raises a hand and what he hopes is a universal gesture of peace. One of the men, a tall, bearded elder, steps forward from their group. He doesn't smile. He doesn't gesture. He simply stands there, his gaze intense and unreadable, his spear held loosely at his side. He is not afraid. He is assessing you. This moment is a classic scene in the annals of exploration, but your experience of it is not one of high drama. It's one of overwhelming strangeness. These people are so completely a part of the landscape that they seem to have grown out of it, like the hardy, twisted trees. Their stillness, their silence, their absolute self minus possession in this environment that is slowly killing you is deeply unnerving. The captain dismounts and walks forward slowly, his hands empty. He offers a gift: a small, shiny steel axe head. To him, it is a treasure, a miracle of modern metallurgy. He places it on the ground and steps back. The elder watches this performance without expression. After a long moment, he walks forward, picks up the axe head, examines it with a brief, clinical curiosity, and then says something to the others in a language that sounds like a collection of clicks and soft guttural stops. Here's a quirky and often overlooked detail of these first encounters: the complete and utter failure to communicate. The explorers were often equipped with word minus lists from coastal Aboriginal groups, naively assuming that the languages would be similar across the continent. They were not. Australia is home to hundreds of distinct languages and dialects. The captain's carefully prepared phrases are as useless here as they would be on the moon. The two groups are locked in a bubble of mutual incomprehension. The encounter ends as quietly as it began. The Aboriginal group seems to make a collective, silent decision. They turn and, without a backward glance, melt back into the scrub, disappearing as quickly and silently as they appeared. They did not seem hostile. They did not seem friendly. They seemed uninterested, as if you were a strange, noisy, and ultimately irrelevant natural phenomenon, like a localized dust storm that would soon pass. The expedition is left in the silence. The encounter, which lasted perhaps 15 minutes, has left a deepened, unsettling impression on you. It has shattered your illusion of being in an empty land. This land is not empty. It is inhabited by people who understand it, who belong to it in a way you never can. Your grand expedition, which feels like the center of the universe to you, was to them a momentary curiosity, not even worth a long look. The nature of these encounters is a subject of intense historical and anthropological debate. The explorers' journals provide the only written record, and they are, of course, filtered through a European lens. What did the Aboriginal people truly think of these pale, slow minus moving, strangely minus clothed invaders? Were they spirits of the dead? Were they simply another tribe to be avoided? We can only guess, piecing together clues from oral traditions and archaeology. The silence from the other side of the encounter is one of the great, tragic voids in the historical record. You get back to your work, that the world feels different. The land is no longer just a geographical problem. It is someone's home, and you are, without a doubt, the intruder. The brief, unsettling encounter with the Aboriginal group fades into memory, and the expedition presses on, deeper into the vast, reed emptiness. The landscape has now reached a new level of monotony. The sparse scrubland has given way to endless, gently undulating plains of sand and gibber small, sharp stones that cover the ground like a carpet of broken glass. In this world devoid of landmarks, the expedition becomes utterly dependent on one man, the navigator. This is not the captain, whose skills are in leadership and grand strategy. This is a quiet, meticulous man, a former naval officer, whose entire existence is now focused on a few precious instruments. His world has shrunk to the compass needle, the bubble in his sextant, and the ticking heart of the chronometer. He is your human guidance system, the only thing that prevents you from walking in circles until you perish. The pressure on this man is immense, and you can see it in the permanent, worried frown etched between his eyes. Every day is the same ritual. At dawn, he is there to catch the first glimpse of the sun on the horizon, taking a bearing. At noon, he is hunched over his sextant, squinting at the sun at its zenith, a process so intense it risks blinding him, all to calculate your latitude. And at night, while you are collapsed in exhaustion, he is awake, taking star-minus sights, checking his calculations against the celestial clockwork. His primary tools are a marvel of 19th-century technology, but they are also fragile and fallible. The compass is his god. He trusts its quivering, north-seeking needle more than he trusts his own eyes. It is the one constant in this shifting, deceptive landscape. The sextant is his instrument of communion with the heavens. It allows him to measure the angle between the horizon and the celestial body with incredible precision. But using it on land is a nightmare. At sea, the horizon is a clear, sharp line. Here, the horizon is a shimmering, indistinct soup of heat haze. To get an accurate reading, he has to use an artificial horizon, a small, shallow dish of mercury that creates a perfectly level, reflective surface. It's a fussy, difficult process. A gust of wind, A slight tremor of the hand can ruin the reading. This is the mainstream science of 19th-century navigation, the bedrock of the British Empire's global reach. These techniques allowed them to map the world, but applying them to the brutal conditions of the Australian interior pushed them to their absolute limit. And here's a wonderfully quirky and stressful detail: the chronometer. This magnificent, fragile clock, which has been ticking away in its padded box since you left Sydney, is the key to longitude. It keeps Greenwich Mean Time. By comparing the time of the local noon which he finds with his sextant to the time on the chronometer, the navigator can calculate how far east or west you are from the prime meridian. But the chronometer is a delicate machine of brass and springs. It is affected by temperature changes, and more importantly, it is being constantly jolted by the movement of the wagon. Has a particularly bad bump thrown off its delicate mechanism by a few seconds, a tiny error in the chronometer can translate to an error of many miles on the ground. The navigator lives in a constant state of low-grade panic about the health of his clock. The psychological toll on these men was immense. Historians reading their journals are often struck by the obsessive, almost neurotic, attention to navigational detail. They were fighting against the immense, disorienting power of the landscape with the only weapons they had: mathematics and precision. To make a mistake was not just a scientific error, it was a potentially fatal one. A miscalculation could lead the expedition away from a known water source or into an impassable tract of country. One afternoon, a crisis occurs. The expedition has been traveling for days through a sea of identical minus-looking reds and dunes. The navigator takes his noon sight and does his calculations. He then confers with the captain. There is a tense, low-voiced argument. You'll learn later what happened. The navigator's position, based on his star sights from the night before, doesn't match his position based on the sun sights and the day's estimated mileage. They are off. They are, in a sense, lost. The confidence of the men, already fragile, evaporates. You are adrift. You look at the navigator, who is now frantically checking his calculations, his face pale with sweat. In that moment, he is not a man of science and certainty. He is a priest whose gods have suddenly fallen silent. Your entire world rests on his ability to get them to speak again. The crisis of being lost lasts for 2 agonizing days. The expedition pushes on, but without its usual conviction. A ship without a rudder. The navigator, looking haunted and sleep-deprived, finally reconciles his charts, blaming the discrepancy on a strange atmospheric distortion or a magnetic anomaly. The captain accepts the explanation, mostly, you suspect, because he has no other choice. The forward march resumes. The landscape of sand dunes eventually gives way to more solid, stony ground. Then, one morning, a cry goes up from the scouts. It's not for water this time. It's for land. On the far western horizon, rising out of the flat plain, is a low, jagged line of purple minus blue. The mountain range. It's the first significant topographical feature you have seen in months. After existing in a 2-dimensional world for so long, the sight of a third dimension, of heightened shadow and substance, is a profound relief. The men stare at it in silence, a mixture of awe and renewed hope on their faces. The captain is visibly moved. He sees the mountain range not just as a landmark, but as a sign. This, he declares to the assembled party, is the final barrier. The great inland sea, he reasons, must lie in the basin just on the other side of these mountains. It's the last, logical piece of the puzzle. The coastal mountains trap the rain on one side. These interior mountains must trap the great rivers on the other, forming the shoreline of the sea he has been seeking. His conviction is infectious. The mood of the camp, so recently plunged into despair, soars once again. The last, draining dregs of hope are scraped from the bottom of the barrel. Every man straightens his shoulders and looks to the west. The mountains are a destination. A tangible goal. The end is in sight. The expedition now has a renewed sense of purpose. The march becomes more focused, more energetic. Every day, the mountains grow larger, their features more distinct. You can start to make out individual peaks and deep, shadowed valleys. They look solid, ancient, and full of promise. This desperate search for a landmark, for anything to break the terrible monotony of the plains, is a constant theme in explorers' journals. A solitary hill, a strange rock formation, or a distant range would be greeted with almost religious fervor. It was proof that the world was not just an endless, repeating pattern, that progress was possible. As you get closer, the ground becomes more rugged. You are in the foothills now, a broken landscape of steep gullies and rocky outcrops. The wagons, which could roll easily over the flat plains, now struggle. You and the other men spend your days pushing the heavy carts up steep inclines and easing them down the other side with ropes. It's back minus breaking, dangerous work. A broken axle or a panicked bullock could send a wagon, with its precious cargo, tumbling into a ravine. But the hardship is bearable because you are so close. The air feels different here. It's thinner, cooler, especially at night. You are climbing, leaving the oppressive heat of the lowlands behind. Here's a quirky geological detail you notice. The rocks here are different. They are a deep, rusty red, and they are incredibly ancient and weathered. The geologist with the expedition is in a state of high excitement, constantly chipping away at outcroppings. He explains to the captain that these are some of the oldest rocks on the face of the earth. The worn miners down stumps of mountains that were once as tall as the Himalayas. You are climbing over the very bones of the world. The debate among historians about the explorer's mindset often focuses on this ability to regenerate hope based on the flimsiest of evidence. Was it a testament to the resilience of the human spirit, or a form of self-minus delusion, a desperate need to find patterns and meaning in a landscape that was fundamentally chaotic? The captain's conviction that the sea must lie behind the mountains is a classic example of confirmation bias. He is fitting the evidence to his theory, not the other way around. After a week of brutal climbing, you make your final camp at the base of the highest peak. Tomorrow, the captain and a small party, including you, will make the final ascent. The rest of the expedition will wait here with the wagons. The atmosphere in the camp that night is electric with anticipation. You can barely eat. You can barely sleep. You are on the very brink of the discovery that has consumed your life for the better part of a year. Tomorrow, you will stand on the summit and be the first European to lay eyes on the great inland sea of Australia. The morning of the ascent is cold and clear. You leave the main camp at dawn, a small, hand-minus picked party of the fittest men. You carry only water, a small amount of food, and the captain's precious telescope. The climb is steep and treacherous, a scramble over loose rock and through thorny, tangled scrub. The air grows thinner, and you can feel the burn in your lungs. The captain pushes the pace relentlessly. He is a man possessed, his eyes fixed on the summit above. The usual military discipline is gone, replaced by a raw, feverish excitement. He says little, simply pointing the way upward. After 3 hours of grueling climbing, you reach the summit ridge. It's a narrow spine of weathered, red rock. The wind here is strong, whipping at your clothes. You are exhausted, your legs trembling, but you are filled with a dizzying sense of anticipation. You are standing on the highest point for 1,000 miles in any direction. The captain is the first to reach the very peak. He walks to the western edge of the summit, raises his telescope to his eye, and looks out. You and the other men hold your breath. You watch his back, a stiff, silhouetted figure against the vast, empty sky. You are waiting for the shout of triumph, the cry of Thalassa, the ecstatic confirmation that your journey is over. The silence stretches. The captain does not move. He remains frozen, the telescope pressed to his eye. 1 minute passes, then 2. The only sound is the mournful howl of the wind. A cold dread, colder than the wind, begins to creep into your heart. Something is wrong. Finally, the captain lowers the telescope. He does it slowly, as if it has suddenly become immensely heavy. He turns to face you, and the look on his face is something you will never forget. It is not anger. It is not disappointment. It is a look of utter, hallowed minus out emptiness. The fire in his eyes, the burning conviction that has driven you all across a continent, has been extinguished. There is nothing, he says. His voice is a dry, dead whisper that the wind snatches away. There is nothing there. He steps aside, and now you can see what he saw. You walk to the edge of the precipice and look out to the west. There is no sea. There is no vast, shimmering expanse of blue. There are no fertile, green shores. There is no great river basin. There is only more of the same. Before you, stretching from the base of the mountains to the very edge of the world, to the curved rim of the earth itself, is an endless, featureless, red plain. It is a vision of geological purgatory, a flat, sterile, waterless ocean of rock and sand, shimmering under the relentless sun. It is the landscape of a dead planet. This is the climactic, soul-minus crushing moment of failure that defines so many of these expeditions. This is the mainstream, iconic image of the inland, quest the explorer on the mountaintop, his dreams shattered by the brutal, indifferent reality of the Australian continent. Charles Sturt, one of the most famous of these explorers, had a very similar experience, climbing a sand dune in the brutal heat only to see an endless sea of red dunes before him. The men are silent. No one knows what to say. To offer words of comfort would be an insult. To express your own disappointment would be pointless. You are all united in a single, crushing moment of collective defeat. The beautiful, logical theory, the theory that made so much sense in the comfortable offices of Sydney and London, has been murdered by this one, horrific view. Here's a quirky, geographical detail that explains the horror of what you're seeing. The plain before you isn't just empty. It's a gibber plain. The ground is covered wall minus to minus wall with a tight minus fitting mosaic of small, sharp, silica minus polished stones. Called dibber, it's the wind minus blasted, sun minus baked remnant of an ancient mountain range that has been eroded down to nothing. It is a desert of stone. You could not ride a horse over it. You could not pull a wagon over it. It is, in every sense of the word, impassable. Historians have long debated the psychological impact of these moments. How does a man like the captain, whose entire identity is tied up in a single idea, cope when that idea is so comprehensively destroyed? Some, like Sturt, were broken by the experience, their health and spirits shattered. Others, with a stubbornness that borders on madness, would refuse to accept the evidence, pushing on until they or their men perished. You look at your leader. He is just staring out at the red emptiness, his face slack, his shoulders slumped. He looks like a man who has aged 20 years in the last 5 minutes. The silence on the mountaintop is the sound of a dream dying. All the hardship, all the suffering, all the hope, it has all led to this. A view of absolute, magnificent, and terrible nothing. You spend less than an hour on that windswept summit, but it feels like a lifetime. The descent back down to the base camp is a somber, silent affair. No one speaks. The only sounds are the crunch of your boots on the loose rock and the sighing of the wind. The elation and energy of the morning's climb have completely evaporated, replaced by a heavy, leaden exhaustion. When you reach the main camp, the men waiting there know the outcome before you even say a word. They see it on your faces. The hope drains from the camp like water from a punctured barrel. The brief, flickering flame of optimism that the mountains had ignited is snuffed out, leaving behind a cold, dark smoke of despair. The captain secludes himself in his tent, refusing to speak to anyone. For the rest of the day, a heavy, funereal quiet hangs over the expedition. The men move about their tasks with a listless, mechanical slowness. There is no anger, no recrimination, just a profound, shared sense of futility. The journey is over. The quest has failed. The next morning, the captain emerges from his tent. He looks gaunt and hollow-eyed, but his military discipline has returned. He gathers the men and makes a short, grim announcement. The inland sea does not exist. Their forward progress is blocked by an impassable desert of stone. They will make one last push to explore the immediate vicinity, and then they will turn back. That final push takes you down from the foothills and out onto the edge of the great plain you saw from the summit. You are now standing on the shore of that waterless ocean, and it is worse up close. This is dirt stony desert, or something very much like it. It is one of the most brutal and bizarre landscapes on the planet. The ground is a single, continuous pavement of sharp, angular stones, packed so tightly together that almost nothing can grow between them. The stones are a deep, rusty red, and they have been polished to a high sheen by millennia of wind-blown sand. They glitter in the sun, a beautiful and malevolent carpet of broken rock. You try to walk on it. Every step is an agony. The sharp stones turn under your boots, threatening to snap your ankle. You can hear them scraping and grinding against the iron rims of the wagon wheels. It's a sound of pure abrasion, the sound of the world being worn down to its barest, most hostile components. The horses hate it. Their hooves, not designed for this kind of punishment, slip and slide on the polished surfaces. A horse could easily go lame here in a matter of minutes. To take the wagons and the main body of the expedition out onto this plain would be an act of suicide. This is the mainstream geological reality that shattered the dreams of the inland sea. The heart of Australia is not a welcoming basin. It is a vast, ancient, and incredibly stable shield of rock. It is a land defined by erosion and desiccation, not by collection and fertility. The explorers work confronting the end, minus product of hundreds of millions of years of geological processes that were completely alien to their European experience. And here's a quirky, almost poetic detail about this terrible place. Because the stones are so dark, they absorb the sun's heat. The surface of the Dibber Plain becomes a literal stovetop. The heat radiating from the ground is immense. You can feel it through the thick soles of your leather boots. Matches dropped on the ground have been known to spontaneously ignite. It is a landscape that actively tries to cook you. The scientific debate about the formation of these desert pavements is ongoing. The classic theory is that wind blows away all the finer sand and dust, leaving the heavier stones behind, which gradually settle into a tight, interlocking mosaic. But other theories suggest that processes of wetting and drying, or the upward movement of salts in the soil, also play a role. It's a complex system that creates a simple, terrifying resultant landscape made of knives. The captain stares out at the stony desert, his face grim. This is the final, undeniable, physical proof of his failure. It is the wall at the end of the world. He has led his men across a continent, through drought and despair, chasing a phantom. And this is his reward, a beautiful, glittering, and utterly impassable Hell's Cape. The dream of the inland sea is not just dead. It has been laid to rest in a coffin of stone. For 2 days, you are camped on the edge of the stony desert, a grim purgatory between the failed quest and the daunting journey home. The expedition is in a state of suspended animation. The men are listless, the future a terrifying blank. The captain remains in his tent, wrestling with his demons. The entire venture hangs in the balance, teetering on the edge of his decision. You spend your time making minor repairs, checking supplies, and trying not to think. You look at the stores. The flour sacks are frighteningly light. The salt meat barrels are more than half empty. The water you carried from the last river is nearly gone. The remorseless arithmetic of your situation is becoming clear. You do not have the resources to linger here. The mood in the camp is a dangerous cocktail of despair and resentment. The men don't speak of it openly, but you can feel it. They followed the captain with a faith that bordered on worship. Now, that faith has been shattered against the rocks of the Dibber Plain. They look at his tent with a new expression in their eyes, a mixture of pity and a dawning, mutinous anger. This is a recurring, critical moment in the history of failed expeditions, the point at which the leader's authority, once absolute, begins to crumble. When the promise that held the group together is broken, the only thing that remains is the primal instinct for individual survival. Historians who study the social dynamics of these ventures see this as the most dangerous moment. A strong leader can manage failure. A broken leader can get everyone killed. On the third morning, the captain finally emerges. He looks older, smaller. The iron certainty that was his defining characteristic is gone. He gathers the men, not with a sharp command, but with a quiet request. He stands before you all, the rising sun at his back, the terrible, glittering plain stretching out behind him. The men are silent, their faces hardened unreadable. He begins to speak, his voice slow and raspy. He does not make excuses. He does not try to spin the failure into a victory of another kind. He simply, quietly, admits the truth. "Gentlemen," he says, and you can hear the effort it takes for him to get the words out. "I was wrong." A collective, silent exhale seems to pass through the assembled men. It is a shocking, disarming admission. The theory was sound, he continues, almost as if trying to convince himself. The evidence was clear. But the continent is not what we thought. There is no sea. There is only this. He gestures behind him at the stony desert. He looks from man to man, his gaze finally meeting yours. For the first time, you see not a commander, but a man, a fallible, broken man. Our mission to find the sea has failed. Our new mission is to survive, to get home. We will begin the return journey at dawn tomorrow. And that is it. No grand speech, no talk of courage or the glory of the attempt, just the quiet, brutal, and deeply honest admission of defeat. It is, you realize, the hardest and bravest thing he has done on the entire journey. To stand in front of the men whose lives he has risked, whose hopes he has dashed, and to take the full weight of the failure onto his own shoulders. The effect on the men is immediate and profound. The tension that has been building for days breaks. The sullen resentment in their eyes is replaced by something else, a grim, reluctant respect. He has failed them as a visionary. But in this moment, he has proven himself as a leader of men. He has shared their defeat instead of hiding from it. Here's a quirky, but important, little detail of command. The most successful leaders, military and otherwise, often share a common trait: the ability to take responsibility for failure. It's a concept that is much discussed in modern leadership theory, but its power is ancient. The captain's simple, to minus word admission, "I was wrong," may have been the very thing that saved the expedition from disintegrating into mutiny and chaos. The debate among historians about what makes a good explorer is complex. Is it the visionary who dreams up the quest? The scientist who makes the discoveries? Or is it the pragmatist who knows when to abandon the dream and bring his people home alive? In this moment, your captain has transitioned from the first type to the last. The meeting breaks up. The men return to their tasks, but with a new energy. There is a purpose again. It is not the glorious purpose of discovery, but the grim, fundamental purpose of survival. The mood is not happy, but it is resolved. You have a direction again. The direction is east. The goal is home. The journey west was fueled by hope. The journey east is fueled by fear. You turn your backs on the stony desert and the mountains of disappointment, and begin the long, slow retreat. The landscape that was filled with promise on the way out is now just a series of obstacles to be overcome. Every mile you cover is a small victory, a mile closer to safety. The atmosphere of the expedition is utterly transformed. The forward march was a noisy, confident affair. The retreat is a quiet, grim, and efficient procession. There is no unnecessary talk. Every ounce of energy is conserved for the task at hand. The men's faces are set in a permanent, dusty mask of grim determination. The silence is the most noticeable change. The easy camaraderie around the campfire is gone. The men are still a team, but they have retreated into themselves. Each man is locked in his own private struggle, calculating his own chances, nursing his own fears. The songs and stories have been replaced by the quiet, methodical tasks of survival, mending a worn minus-out boot, cleaning a rifle, carefully measuring the day's water ration. This psychological shift is a common theme in the literature of survival. When the grand, collective goal is gone, the focus shrinks to the small, the personal, the immediate. Your world is no longer about discovering a sea. It's about finding the next waterhole, making the flower last another week, and keeping the festering sores on your feet from getting infected. The captain is a changed man. The visionary dreamer is gone, replaced by a ruthless pragmatist. His focus is no longer on the horizon, but on the daily ledger of supplies. You see him every night, calculating and recalculating the dwindling stores of food and water. He has become a miser of survival, hoarding every grain of flour, every drop of water. He makes hard decisions. The pace of the march is increased. The midday halt is shortened. The rations, already meager, are cut further. You are now perpetually hungry. A dull, aching emptiness in your stomach that never goes away. The men grumble, but they obey. They understand the brutal mathematics of the situation. To linger is to die. Here's a quirky, but grim, detail of your new reality. You begin to look at your animals differently. The bullocks and horses are no longer just beasts of burden. They are emergency rations. When a horse goes lame, it is no longer left behind. It is butchered, and its tough, stringy meat is a welcome. His somber addition to the pot. Nothing is wasted. The hide is used for repairs. The bones are boiled for a thin broth. It's a brutal, unsentimental economy of survival. The landscape itself feels different on the return journey. The features that seemed so full of potential on the way out now seem menacing. Each stretch of sandy country that was a minor annoyance before is now terrifying. Water minus sucking trap. A line of hills that was a welcome break in the monotony is now a grueling, energy minus sapping obstacle. You are seeing the same country, but through different eyes, the eyes of a fugitive, not an explorer. The historical debate around the heroism of explorers often grapples with this. Is the true test of an explorer the outward journey of discovery, or the inward journey of retreat? The skills required are completely different. The former requires vision and optimism. The latter requires resilience, pragmatism, and a deep, intimate understanding of failure. Some of the greatest stories of exploration are not stories of triumph, but of incredible, odds-minus defying retreats. The journey of Shackleton's crew from the Antarctic is a prime example. You walk with your head down, your world reduced to the pair of worn minus-out boots in front of you. You no longer look at the horizon. There is nothing for you there. The only direction that matters is east. You follow the sun in the morning and keep it at your back in the afternoon. It is your only compass, your only guide on this long, silent, and desperate journey home. The grand adventure has failed. The great escape has just begun. The world of the expedition has shrunk, its values inverted. The precious scientific instruments, once the pride of the journey, now seem like useless, heavy burdens. The geological samples, so carefully collected, are now just dead weight. All the complex aspirations of science, commerce, and empire have been boiled down to a single, primal, all-minus consuming obsession: water. Water is the only currency that matters. It is the only topic of conversation. It is the first thought in your head when you wake, and the last prayer on your lips when you sleep. Your entire existence revolves around the next drink. The retreat is a desperate, strategic game of connecting the dots being the waterholes and soaks that you marked on your map during the outward journey. Missing one of these, or finding it dry, would be a death sentence. The daily water ration is now the central ritual of your life. Each evening, The captain himself supervises its distribution. He unlocks the large cask on the main wagon, the expedition's strategic reserve, and carefully measures out a single pint of water for each man. You receive your ration in your tin mug, and you are faced with a terrible choice. Do you gulp it down at once, satisfying the raging thirst in your throat? Or do you sip it slowly, trying to make the relief last, savoring every drop as it moistens your cracked lips and dusty tongue? You learn to think about water in ways you never imagined. You become a connoisseur of its subtle variations. The clear, sweet water from a granite rock minus hole is a rare, treasured vintage. The cloudy, mineral minus rich water from a clay pan is less desirable, but still a blessing, than the greenish, stagnant water from a nearly minus dry soak, full of algae-wriggling larvae, is a desperate, last resort. You learn to drink it through a piece of cloth to filter out the worst of the livestock, as the men grimly call it. This obsession with water is the most dominant theme in the journals of every Australian inland explorer. This is the mainstream, central struggle of their story. They write about it with an almost poetic intensity, describing the taste, the temperature, and the color of every water source they find. The English language, born in a wet, green land, seems to struggle to capture the nuances of a landscape defined by its absence. And here's a wonderfully quirky and desperate technique you learn. In the mornings, before the sun gets high, you will sometimes see dew collected on the leaves of a few sparse plants. You learn to collect this with a cloth, carefully dabbing the leaves and then wringing the precious, clean moisture into your mouth. It amounts to less than a thimble FUL, but it feels like a gift from heaven. It is a tiny, private act of survival, a secret communion with the landscape. You also learn about the Aboriginal knowledge of water. On the way out, you passed by certain reeds or rock formations without a second glance. Now, on the return journey, guided by a desperate new attention to detail, you might notice a subtle sign, a particular type of tree that only grows where the water table is high, or a crack in a rock that might hold a hidden soak. The expedition's own naturalist, who once focused on collecting new species, is now focused on reading the landscape for signs of life. The historical debate about the relationship between the explorers and Aboriginal knowledge often centers on this point. The explorers were often dismissive of what they saw as primitive local knowledge. Yet, the journals are filled with instances where they were saved by stumbling upon a native well or being shown a hidden spring by a guide. How many expeditions failed because they were unable, or unwilling, to read the subtle map of water that the Aboriginal inhabitants had been successfully using for millennia? One evening, you arrive at a waterhole that was full and deep on your outward journey. You find it is now just a patch of white mud. A collective, despairing groan goes through the party. The next known water source is a 2-day march away. The captain makes another grim decision. The water ration for the horses, already severely cut, is eliminated. The survival of the men now takes absolute precedence. You lie in your swag that night, your throat aching with thirst, and you listen to the mournful, weak WH in eyes of the horses. They are your companions, your partners in this struggle, and you know that you are now in a race against time, a race to find water before they, and then you, begin to drop. The race against thirst has become the expedition's entire world. You make it to the next waterhole, finding just enough muddy water to save yourselves and the remaining animals. But the victory is temporary, the relief fleeting. The journey has taken on the character of a recurring nightmare, a desperate, multi-day march, a moment of muddy relief, and then another desperate march. The physical cost of this cycle is beginning to show. The men are no longer just thin. They are skeletal. Their skin is stretched taut over their bones, their eyes sunk deep into their skulls. They move with a slow, shuffling gait, their bodies stooped with a weariness that goes beyond simple muscle fatigue. It is a deep, cellular exhaustion. Every man is an island of private suffering, nursing his own collection of ailments, the raw, weeping sores on his feet, the dull ache in his back, the dizzy spells that come from standing up too quickly. One afternoon, during the hottest part of the day, the inevitable happens. You are walking behind one of the wagons, your head down, lost in the usual trance of dust and heat. You hear a sound ahead, not a shout, but a soft, clumsy stumble, followed by the clatter of a dropped canteen. You look up. One of the men, a quiet fellow named Harris, who usually walks near the front, is on his knees. He stays there for a moment, as if praying, and then slowly, with a kind of gentle finality, he keels over onto his side and lies still in the reed dust. The column grinds to a halt. There is no panic. No one rushes forward. The men simply stop and stare, their faces blank. Everyone knew this was coming. It was just a question of who would be first. The captain and the expedition's naturalist, a man who also serves as its de facto doctor, hurry to Harris's side. They roll him onto his back. His face is flushed a deep, alarming red. His skin is bone-dry to the touch, and his breathing is shallow and rapid. He is unconscious. The captain diagnoses it with a single, grim word: sunstruck. This is the ever-present danger, the acute crisis that can strike in a matter of minutes. The slow threat of scurvy is a distant worry. The rapid threat of fatal heatstroke is here and now. The men form a silent circle as the doctor goes to work. He opens the expedition's medical chest, a large wooden box filled with small, neatly labeled bottles and packets. This is the expedition's entire arsenal against death and disease. The treatment is a fumbling, desperate affair, based on the limited medical knowledge of the time. This is a mainstream historical reality. 19th-century field medicine was a grim combination of traditional remedies and well-intentioned guesswork. First, they carry Harris to the pathetic shade of a nearby acacia tree. They pour some of their precious water onto a rag and begin to bathe his face and neck. So far, so good. But then the doctor brings out his bottles. He forces a few drops of laudanum, a mate tincture of opium. The universal cure minus, all between Harris's lips. Hoping to calm his system, he considers bleeding him, a common treatment for fever, but decides against it, perhaps realizing instinctively that the man has no more fluid to spare. The debate among medical historians looking at these explorers' journals is often about trying to diagnose these illnesses from such vague descriptions. The term sun-fever or sunstroke could cover a multitude of sins, from classic heat stroke to severe dehydration or even the onset of an infectious disease like typhoid. The limited diagnostic tools meant that the treatment was often a shot in the dark. After an hour, Harris's breathing becomes a little deeper, but he remains unconscious. The reality of the situation sinks in. He cannot walk. He cannot ride a horse. He is now a passenger, a piece of living cargo that must be carried. This is a logistical and moral nightmare. A makeshift stretcher is fashioned, and he is loaded onto one of the wagons, displacing valuable supplies. The wagon's pace, already slow, will now be even slower. He will require extra water. He is a drain on the expedition's desperately thin resources. But to leave him is unthinkable. He is not a lame bullock. He is one of them. Their grim, silent fellowship demands that he be cared for, even if it puts them all at greater risk. The march resumes, but the dynamic has changed. The expedition now has a focal point for its misery. The sight of Harris's inert form, bouncing helplessly in the back of the wagon, is a constant, terrifying reminder of their own fragility. Every man feels a sympathetic twinge in his own body, a new awareness of the fine line they are all walking. Harris is the first to fall. Everyone knows he will not be the last. The journey with the unconscious Harris in the back of the wagon is a slow, grim, and surreal funeral procession. The days are a blur of heat and dust and the constant, gnawing anxiety of the next dry camp. The landscape remains a hostile, unchanging read. You begin to believe you will never see another color again. You have forgotten what green looks like. Then, after what feels like an eternity of marching through this purgatorial landscape, The scout rides back from the front of the column, his face alight with an emotion you haven't seen in months. Genuine, unadulterated joy. Trees, he shouts, his voice cracking. Real trees, in grass. You stumble forward, joining the other men who are hurrying to the top of a low rise. Then there, in the valley below you, is a sight so beautiful and so longed minus for that it brings tears to your eyes. It's a line of dark green, marking the course of a creek, not a dry, ghostly creek bed, but one that is flowing with actual water. Its banks lined with reeds and, beyond them, the familiar, beloved shapes of river red gums. You have made it back to the river system. You have crossed the great, waterless divide and reached the outer tendrils of the coastal watershed. You are not home yet, not even close, but you have escaped the desert. The sight of the color green is a physical shock. After months of living in a world of red, brown, and ochre, the vibrant, living green of the trees and grass is almost painfully intense. It's a visual feast, a drink for your starved eyes. You can smell it, too, the damp, earthy smell of a living, breathing ecosystem. It's the smell of life. The expedition descends into the valley like a band of pilgrims reaching a holy shrine. The men don't just drink the water. They plunge their heads into it. They splash it on their faces. You see men just sitting on the bank, running their hands through the blades of cool, green grass, as if to reassure themselves that it is real. The horses and bullocks, near the point of collapse, drink until their bellies are bloated. This moment of Ray Minus encountering a fertile landscape is a powerful, recurring scene in the explorer's narratives. It's a moment of rebirth. The desert is a place of death and testing. The riverlands are a place of life and salvation. The mainstream story of their journey is often framed by these two opposing landscapes. Harris, the sick man, is gently carried to the shade of a large gum tree. He is still weak, but the cleaner water and the cooler air seem to revive him slightly. He opens his eyes for the first time in days, his gaze unfocused and confused, but he is alive. And here's a quirky, but vital, detail of your salvation. The creek is full of life. You see small fish darting in the shallows. And, more importantly, you see Abby's small, freshwater crayfish scuttling under the rocks. The men, with a newfound energy, fashion crude fishing lines and nets. That night, for the first time in months, you eat your fill. You feast on boiled crayfish and grilled fish. It is the most delicious meal you have ever tasted. It's not just food, it's medicine. The fresh protein and the unknown, life minus giving elements within it begin to knit your starving bodies back together. Historians studying the health and diet of these expeditions often point to these moments as critical turning points. The sudden influx of fresh, high minus quality protein and micronutrients, what we would now call vitamins and minerals, could literally pull a crew back from the brink of death by starvation and scurvy. The ability to live off the land, even for a short period, was often the deciding factor between a failed expedition and a dead one. For the next week, the expedition makes slow, easy progress, following the creek as it joins a larger river. It is a period of recuperation and recovery. The men's bodies and spirits begin to heal. The hollow mind aside, skeletal figures start to look like men again. The silence is broken by conversation, even the occasional, rusty laugh. You are still in the wilderness, still far from home. But the character of the wilderness has changed. It is no longer a hostile, alien entity. It is a green, living, benevolent world. You have passed through the fire and come out on the other side. The journey is far from over, but for the first time in a very long time, you are certain that you are going to survive it. The journey down the river system is like rewinding a film in slow motion. The landscape gradually becomes more lush, more familiar. The single river you are following is joined by tributaries, growing wider and more confident. The small outposts of the natural world, the kangaroos, the emus, the strange lizards are slowly replaced by the outposts of the colonial world. The first sign is a distant, solitary plume of smoke on the horizon that does not belong to a campfire. The next day, you see them sheep. A vast, slow-moving flock of them, grazing on the grassy plains, attended by a single shepherd and his dogs. The shepherd, a grizzled man in a floppy hat, stares at you as if he has seen a ghost. Your party, with its ragged clothes, its long, matted beards, and its sun-blackened skin, must look like a vision from another world. You have reached the frontier, the outermost edge of the settled districts. The psychological impact is jarring. After months of solitude, the sight of another European, of domesticated animals, of a world managed and controlled by man, is deeply strange. A few days later, you reach the first permanent structurist quarters station. It's a rough hewn homestead made of slab timber and bark, surrounded by sturdy stockyards. The squatter, a hard-bitten man with suspicious eyes, comes out to meet you. When he recognizes the captain and understands who you are, the great expedition. Returned from the dead, his suspicion melts away into a torrent of hospitality. You are ushered into his simple home, and you are overwhelmed by the sensations of civilization, the smell of baking bread, the sight of a woman in a dress, the feeling of sitting on a wooden chair at a proper table. These simple, everyday things, which you once took for granted, now seem like miracles of luxury. The squatter's wife places a plate of freshly roasted mutton and boiled potatoes in front of you. You stare at it. It is a feast of unimaginable richness. After a diet of salt meat and boiled weeds, the taste of fresh meat, of salt, of butter, is so intense it's almost painful. You eat slowly, deliberately, trying to acclimate your shrunken stomach to the shock of real food. This experience, the culture shock of returning to civilization, is a common theme in the final chapters of explorers' journals. They often wrote of feeling disoriented and out of place. The quiet, disciplined, and intensely focused world of the expedition was gone, replaced by a world that seemed loud, chaotic, and frivolous. Here's a quirky and telling detail of your century. A squatter offers you a drink of rum. You haven't tasted alcohol in nearly a year. You take a sip. The fiery liquid hits your system like a bolt of lightning. It goes straight to your head. After just a few sips, the room is spinning. The men, once so stoic and resilient, are reduced to giddy, laughing fools by a single glass of spirits. Your tolerance for the vices of civilization has vanished completely. The squatter and his family pepper you with questions. What did you find? Did you see the sea? What is it like out there? How do you answer? How do you explain the vast, read emptiness? How do you describe the soul-minus crushing disappointment of the Stony desert, or the silent, judging gaze of the aboriginal men? You find you have no words. The experiences are too large, too strange to be packaged into a simple story. You just shake your head and murmur, "It's empty. There's nothing there." The historical debate about the success of these failed expeditions often hinges on this point. They may have failed in their primary objective, but they succeeded in another, unintended way. They brought back a new, more accurate, and far more intimidating picture of the continent. They replaced a comfortable European myth with a harsh Australian reality. Their failure was, in itself, a form of discovery. It was the discovery of what was not there. You spend a day at the station, resting and repairing your gear. The squatter provides you with fresh supplies. The journey from here will be easier, through settled country, but as you prepare to leave, you feel a strange, unexpected pang of something. You look back at the vast, empty horizon to the west. You find yourself missing the silence. You miss the clarity and simplicity of a life reduced to pure survival. You are returning to the world of men, of rules, of commerce, of trivial concerns, and you are not entirely sure you are ready for it. The wilderness tested you, broke you, and nearly killed you, but it also changed you in ways you are only just beginning to understand. The final leg of the journey back to Sydney is a strange, triumphant, An anticlimactic procession as you move through the settled districts. News of your return travels ahead of you. At every town and major homestead, you are greeted by small crowds of curious onlookers. They cheer for you, but it's a confused kind of cheer. They are celebrating your survival, but they don't quite know what to make of your failure. You are no longer explorers. You are curiosities. You are the men who went to the edge of the world and came back with nothing but a story of emptiness. The men, once so gaunt and dragged, are now clean minus shaven and dressed in new clothes provided by grateful colonial officials. But the look in their eyes is still distant, haunted. You look like settlers again, but you don't feel like them. Finally, after more than a year, you see it. From the top of a hill, you look down upon the sprawling, familiar chaos of Sydney and the magnificent, heartbreakingly beautiful blue of the Pacific Ocean. You are home. Your entry into the city is not the grand, triumphant parade you might have imagined on that hopeful morning you departed. There are no marching bands or flying banners. Instead, a large, quiet crowd lines the main street. They watch you pass in a respectful, almost somber silence. They see the thin ranks of your party, the weary slump of your shoulders, the ghosts of the desert still clinging to you. They are witnessing not the return of conquerors, but the return of survivors. You are officially disbanded. You receive your final pay, a hefty sum of silver coins that feels strangely lightened, meaningless in your hand. You shake hands with the other men, your companions in misery and resilience. You share a look of profound, unspoken understanding. You have been through an ordeal that no one else in this bustling city can ever comprehend. You are members of a small, exclusive club. Then, you drift apart, each man returning to whatever life he had before. The captain is a celebrated figure, but his fame is tinged with tragedy. He is the man who proved the inland sea did not exist. He will write a book about his journey, a book that will be a bestseller in London, praised for its stoic heroism and its vivid descriptions of the terrible landscape. He has failed to find the sea, but he has secured his place in history. This is the mainstream legacy of these explorers. Men like Sturt, Dare, and Leichhardt became household names, symbols of British imperial courage and endurance. Their failures were reframed as heroic struggles against a hostile land, their stories becoming foundational myths for the young colony. And what about you? You find a room in a noisy boarding house near the docks. You eat a hot meal that doesn't taste of salt and smoke. You sleep in a soft bed that feels strange and suffocating after a year on the hard ground. In the days that follow, you find yourself adrift. The noise of the city is a constant assault on your senses. The concerns of its inhabitants, the price of wool, a minor political scandal, a new shipment of goods from England seem absurdly trivial. You feel a profound sense of dislocation. You are a stranger in your own world. Here's a final, quirky detail of your post-minus expedition life. You develop strange habits. You find yourself scanning the horizon for rain clouds. You catch yourself hoarding scraps of food. You wake up in the middle of the night in a cold sweat, your throat parched, convinced you are still in the desert. The expedition is over, but it is not over within you. The historical and psychological aftermath for the ordinary members of these expeditions is a story that is rarely told. The leaders wrote the books and received the accolades. The men who did the walking, the hoeing, and the suffering often just disappeared back into the anonymous stream of colonial life, carrying their experiences with them in silence. What was the long-term cost of their ordeal? Did they suffer from what we would now call post-traumatic stress disorder? It's a largely unwritten chapter of the story. One evening, you walk down to the harbor and stare out at the ocean. It is vast, blue, and alive. It is everything the inland sea was supposed to be, and you feel a strange, paradoxical mix of emotions. You feel the bitter sting of your failure, the memory of the red, stony desert that broke your dream, but you also feel a quiet, stubborn pride. You went there. You saw it. You survived. You may have returned empty-handed, but you came back with the truth. And in the end, perhaps that is a discovery worth making. And so, their long, dusty march across the Australian continent comes to an end. The sharp, reed edges of the Stony desert begin to soften and blur in your mind. The memory of the relentless sun fades, leaving only a gentle, residual warmth. The gnawing ache of thirst is quenched, replaced by a deep and satisfying sense of peace. You can feel the phantom weight of the backpack lifting from your shoulders, the grit of the reed dust washing away. The world of hardship and survival recedes, and you are left floating in the quiet, comfortable space of your own bed. The journey is over. The silence you now hear is not the unnerving emptiness of the desert, but the calm, soothing quiet of a deep and restorative sleep. Rest now. You have earned it. The end of the article. Good night.